welcome to another power session brought to you by Chief. We are in our fourth of 6 parts with UnlimitIT, UnlimitIT. The gentlemen from UnlimitIT always say, have an unlimited day. And I love their byline. They've brought today into the room with them Dean Clayton from the West Midlands in the UK. And great to have Dean in the room with us. Hi, Dean.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Great. Hi, Chris. Hi, Dewald.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Dean. Morning, Dennis. Hi, guys.
Morning.
Fantastic. Our subject today is generative AI. Everyone seems to be a specialist in AI all of a sudden. We're all into our chat GPTs, our Bards, our Claudes, and the like. Everyone's got their favorite AI that they're into. And it's great to have Dean in the room with us. Dewald, maybe you can start by sharing just the reason why Dean has been pulled in to our discussion.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. And Dean, thank you very much. Dean is one of our OEMs, exceptionally knowledgeable around this topic in AI. And if we can just take half of what the leaders in the industry is saying at this point in time in AI, we're definitely in for interesting times. But I think for the larger community out there, it's more like standing on the event horizon of a black hole. You know, there's not 100% sure what all of this means, and and how it's going to get regulated, should it get regulated, but we're not going to get into that today. I think I know that AI has got the potential of creating huge advantages inside enterprise service management, and we would love to understand how it can enhance the experience of our customers, and obviously assist in adoption of enterprise service management in organizations, and then all the peripheral nice things that we get from gaining efficiencies and so on. So yeah, we're going to bomb you with a bunch of questions, and looking forward to you providing some clarity.
All right. Hopefully I'll make some sense out of this, but we'll see what happens, right?
Hugely topical. Hugely topical. Great to have you, Dean. Maybe I can start with a couple of stats that I've just pulled. Okay. I think the source is Capgemini, and the heading of these stats says percentage of respondents that see the most potential for generative AI models to drive innovation and create value. Now, we're all about creating value for organizations across business functions. And they list 7 or 8 of these business functions. Number 1, IT, obviously, driving innovation in other functions, testing and coding assistance. They say 67%. So there's the big number. The second one, which I think applies to ESM and ITSM, is sales, customer service, optimizing support, chatbot, self-service. And the third one being marketing and communications, 48%. That second one being 54%. So huge positiveness. I picked up another stat in the week where I think it's a McKinsey stat, where the lived experience among CEOs of what their CIOs promise them in terms of the AI investment is somewhat different. They're sort of only peaking at about the 31% mark in terms of the value that they're seeing being generated. So with that sort of intro, maybe a little bit contentious, Dean, some thoughts on generative AI and how we use it in the ESM environment.
No, thanks. That's certainly some interesting stats, and I think that kind of, from what I see, kind of mirrors a lot of what I see within where we're talking to customers and some of the reports, things that I read out there as well. I think the problem is because it's so new, or generative AI is such a new topic, but is moving so quickly. There is that kind of, should we say, push and pull from either direction, right? Kind of like, is this something that we should be all in and push for? But it's kind of sort of almost that Wild West kind of feel of like, what's going to happen? Are we going to be launching the next Skynet type service, or is it something that's going to be truly helpful and actually drive a lot of business? I know there was as an example of that. There was a Microsoft webinar that was done just last week, where they talked about the fact that they're looking that just generative AI within Microsoft is looking to add somewhere in the region of 10 billion to the global economy, because it's such a huge thing. And I think, that, like a lot of things, it is that little bit divisive. Now, when we kind of look at it from I guess within ITSM and ESM perspective, it's kind of, how can it help, right? As you mentioned, a lot of what we do within IT is all about support, right? Or dealing with the requests that people have within their organization or outside of the organization coming in. And, there's so much that we've done, and, over the as part of service management, to kind of sort of define processes, make things easier, streamline, and drive towards automation, that, to me, the ability, some of the different aspects of generative AI, specifically around large language models and having that conversational type experience, can sort of really make a huge impact on productivity, and maybe from a point of view of some of the people involved, the people that work in, say, like on a service desk, they don't need to be answering the should we say the how do I reset my password and just the really basic things. Those can be kind of shifted to AI to handle, right? We'll talk about probably what that experience is like for people as well, but they can then kind of focus on getting the proper fixes in that are needed within IT, right? Helping tier 2, tier 3, and in effect, if done rightly, you could argue that generative AI could eliminate tier 1 support, right?
So maybe I can just ask you, I see a little bit of my own youth in your background cabinet.
Okay.
And I don't know if they're bots or figurines or superheroes, but I think that's triggering a thought. Speak to me like I'm a 5-year-old in terms of generative AI. Before we go deeper into this, how would you explain this to my daughter?
Okay. So I probably the best way I like to describe it is, in effect, it's like having a subject matter expert in your pocket, right? Whenever I've worked within service desks or in different roles, you always end up having like your little black book, right, where you write all your notes down that help you, your little quick tips and that kind of thing. Or there's people, right? There's always someone, right? Like if I need to know something really important, I'll speak to Chris, because I know that he'll know his way around certain things around service management, right? If it's cool stuff, I'll speak to Dewald instead, because no offense, Chris. But it's those connections and that things. And I think the concept of generative AI and the fact that it has this, potential to have all the knowledge in the world. I mean, there's always a concern around that as well, about what, bias and fairness around that. But you've got that subject matter expert in your pocket. You can ask it the question and it will always come back with the answer that you need. Or even, as you say, explain it like a 5-year-old if it's a more complex topic.
Love it. I think you learned something there too, Chris. Am I right?
Always.
Why is it a game changer, guys? This is a game changer, isn't it? Everyone says this is a game changer. This is going to change the world. So much has changed in the last 6 months of our lives. Thoughts on why it's a game changer?
Is that for me, or is it?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So take that situation around, being the subject matter expert, right, and having that answer. Now spin that to the fact that, let's say I have a question for HR, right? I need to find out about, my wife just got pregnant. I need to find out what's the maternity cover leave, that kind of thing, right? Fire off an email that goes across to probably like a HR ticket system. No disrespect to various different companies, but some of the companies I've worked with in the past, it could be like a week before I get an answer back. It's they might as well have posted the message in the letter to me. With absorb, should we say, that corporate knowledge, right? And how within the business it's utilized that stuff. I can get the answer back in 10 seconds, and have it explained to me in a way that I can understand and what the benefits are for me. And then even, should we say, compared to where we talked about chatbots in the past, which there's a phrase that's used in generative AI around what they call zero shot. So you ask one question and the answer you get back is kind of the full answer that you want, that summarization you need. You could actually have multiple, in generative AI, you can have that multiple conversations or questions, follow-on questions, and it will understand, right? It's not like almost like I ask a question and then it's forgotten what you've just talked about. So you can go into that into that bit of deep dive. And that, just as an example, the amount of time that's within the company means that's time I could spend doing something else for the company. Now, I'm sure, we all want to, from a CEO perspective, we want all our employees to be ultra productive, right? And it's going to, in theory, that's where it's going to start to drive with, at least to begin with, is where I think there's a lot of scope where we can go as kind of you plug in, should we say, generative AI into other services and automation and other areas. You can really go down a rabbit hole on this if you really wanted to, I think that's kind of that first area of that subject matter expert, that knowledge expert, that's going to be probably the primary use cases where companies can start to see an advantage day one by adopting generative AI.
Great use case example, that maternity example I've used in the past with service desks. We used to sort of plug into a knowledge management system, and then it would spit out a list of policies that you can click on and then go and look at the PDF sort of thing in the past. This is obviously something very, very different. In financial services, the guys are a little bit concerned, aren't they, about security? They're concerned about maybe this AI being too smart and information getting out there that shouldn't be getting out there. What are some of the concerns that we potentially have with these use cases that you mentioned?
So I think a lot of that concern comes from the fact that, should we say, what you're seeing in how generative AI has kind of sort of exploded over the last 6 to 9 months is because of public services like what OpenAI have done with ChatGPT, right? And with those public, should we say, I don't like saying the word consumer grade, right? Because it's not, because it is quite groundbreaking, but something that me as an individual can access, right? Those systems and those private companies that are running those particular systems in that public space, they're learning off the data that's entered into it as well, right? So where you seen, was it I think earlier this year, like Samsung banned generative AI usage, right, within their company, right? And it's a lot of companies early this year, there was kind of that little bit of fear mongering, kind of, all our company secrets are going to suddenly be out there because you've typed in, maybe passed it some, as an example, where people were like, oh, I'll feed it in some of our company financial data to get it to generate a report for me.
Correct.
Right? Save me a load of time, right, and make me look good in front of my boss. And then suddenly that data set technically exists that anyone else could query, right? Now, it's not quite that clear cut in terms of how quickly that potentially becomes visible, but I think the issue is because a lot of that technology is, should we say, being done by people who are very technically capable. It's off the charts kind of smarts, definitely not like me at all. They're less focused on the implications, should we say,
Correct.
and more focused on trying to improve the technology, right?
If I'm trying to get something done though, and I know I'm feeding the engine, so let's take Claude for example. I ask Claude to read a document and I say, tell me when you've read it, and Claude comes back and says, yeah, I've read it. And then I'll ask Claude to do something with this document, and I'm very comfortable because I've got it repopulated into tabular format for myself because I've asked for that outcome in terms of my prompt engineering. The company doesn't know that I've necessarily fed it with this content, does it? So what would the motivation be for myself not to be feeding content into some of these public environments? Or are you proposing with generative AI in a closed user environment that it learns a closed user set of content?
It's a good question. I think the way that I look at it is you're seeing a lot of with what OpenAI have done with Microsoft and their kind of like private enterprise hosted version of some of the ChatGPT, or some of the functionality you see within what they've done with Claude, or what Google are doing with Bard, is they're starting to put that little bit of a privacy option, right? This data won't be potentially used for training, for further training, that kind of thing, to try and help alleviate some of that concerns. I think you're right, though, from an individual perspective, right? The company doesn't know what I'm doing, potentially. But then, having said that, if I'm doing that on a corporate PC, right, you would expect that the company would have some visibility of how I'm using that corporate PC. So it's kind of like a, do you want to take the risk there? And I think there's an interesting point there, because actually for companies and organizations around the world, there's kind of, it's almost like three roads you could take around generative AI, right? So one is you could take the I'm going to ban it, right? We don't want anyone to use it. It's not for us, and we're too concerned about the potential risks of the data going out there, and that's one route. The other option is you could ignore it, right, and just say, oh no, we don't care about generative AI. It's not important to us. Well, if you think about those two strategies, as an organization, as a company, and if you're a CEO or a CIO or a CTO type level, right, you're instantly putting yourself as a disadvantage to your competitors, because you can bet that if you're not doing it, they're going to do it. So really, it's kind of a case of, embrace it, or should we say centralize it, right? Now, there's different strategies you can do to that, right? So one option is, if you're an organization that wants to, you can use enterprise generative AI solutions, like what you can get from people like Microsoft, where they're with their private solutions, or you could build your own using some of the open source capabilities out there, or use like what we're doing within OpenText, where we're building out LLM solutions to help customers with specific use cases and needs, right? And bring that in to help gain that advantage from generative AI within your business. The other aspect of it as well is how your users within the company are using generative AI, right? Allow people to share how they're doing and what they're doing, right? Because the chances are the people who are not the experts in a particular field, right? I'll be the first to put my hand up. I'm not an Excel person, right? I've never been. I always get amazed when you see these people that kind of like, have all these amazing charts and wizards and pivot tables, and like I click here one thing and then suddenly everything else populates and I got all these charts. I haven't got the first clue how to do that, right? But with generative AI in a company, people like me are going to be the ones that's going to go to generative AI and say, how can I make this chart or do this kind of thing?
Correct.
Right? And now suddenly that advantage that person has, whoever it was within the company who knows how to do that, it's a level playing field for me a little bit. I mean, maybe not quite, but I'm starting to be able to, should we say, compete on an individual level and produce that kind of quality. So I think that's really the big takeaway for me, is kind of, look, a bit like when the web came along, right? And people kind of go, oh, it's just a thing for geeks. It's not going to be really important, right? Embrace it. Try and figure out how you can utilize it. And there's ways you can do that without sharing corporate data, right? You can play around with it, and there's loads of, there's so many articles around how to do prompt engineering as well, and that in itself is potentially even a whole new world of job opportunities for people. I'm not entirely convinced that there's a potential job market for that kind of thing, but again, it's that fact where people who are learning quickly and being curious are getting that advantage in that kind of space.
I've certainly seen, if I take a look at LinkedIn, the prompt engineering piece certainly permeating through, paying good numbers, certainly for some sort of Upwork environment and understanding folk where they say, roll up your sleeves. We don't want you to be managing a group of people. We want you to be that prompt engineer that can extract the information we're looking for very, very quickly. So I've certainly seen that. The question that I would ask, looking currently at the use cases that you're dealing with, potentially you can share one or two stories with us, no need to mention company name, where you are confronted with a difficult use case and how you are utilizing the generative AI with the open text backing that you have to solve client problems and generate value.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I'll give you a little bit of insight into what we're doing and some of the use cases that we're going for. So across OpenText, you can go to opentext.ai, which is kind of sort of our landing page for all the different areas where we're looking at how generative AI can help organizations with all the different products we have within our portfolio to help them. But within our area, within, should we say, IT operations management, and what we're doing with our Aviator as our kind of sort of global brand around AI is known, we're looking at it purely from a use case basis to begin with, right? So we've got obviously a variety of products to help with, whether it's from a service desk tools with SMAX, with monitoring tools with like OpsBridge or NOM, where it's network monitoring or server monitoring, or like cloud management tools. We're kind of looking at the initial use cases where you, in essence, can get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So, obviously these things are not going to be, should we say, free, because ultimately there's a cost involved with, hosting and managing these large data sets. I mean, was it OpenAI themselves readily admitted earlier this year that it's like several hundred million a day or something that they were talking about that it cost them to run their GPT environment. So, but those costs eventually will come down. So that's something that that's going to happen, and customers will be able to potentially even have like their own on-premise deployment of LLMs and AI and what have you. But I think from a point of view of where we're looking at is we're starting with that concept of knowledge and summarization, right? Because it's an easy use case in support. Going back to what I mentioned before around the maternity leave example, right? That's a really, really clear-cut example where I'm increasing and making life easier for the people within the business. If you look at it in a slightly different way, from, should we say, like a legal kind of sales type perspective, if you've got an AI that's within your support tool that is learning off your corporate data, so you've got an element of, should we say, privacy, right, and security around that data, because it's all held within your own ecosystem, whether that's hosted by us or longer term in an on-premise world. That enterprise intelligence is going to be a huge advantage of you, right? And also you want to make sure you've got the appropriate access controls around it. But take an example. I'm a sales guy. I'm looking with an organization. I'm trying to sell to my customers or an existing customer. I want to go look at the contract details, right? So I want to, and it could be, contracts. How many pages of documents are contracts these days, right? Huge, right? So the fact that I could turn around and say, rather than, going back and just saying, oh, here's the contract document, and then spending the next several, if I'm lucky, maybe I find the answer within an hour. If not, it's several days of trawling through things. But being able to kind of ask questions about that document, right, and kind of sort of say, how much did the customer ultimately pay, right? Who signed the paperwork? When's the contract due to expire, right? These are kind of things that there's tools out there that people use within enterprise where they'll store that in separate fields of data, right, in like a management system. But this allows you to kind of sort of almost interrogate that actual contract, and maybe if there are questions.
Great use case. None of us love to go and interrogate a contract, especially it's in PDF format. Dewald, do you want to make a comment on this?
Yeah, I didn't want to interject and stop Dean there, but I've got a question. So, OpenText being one of the biggest players in content management, is there a play with generative AI that you guys got hooking that up into the content management?
Yeah, absolutely. So a kind of approach that we're taking is kind of almost like, should we say, I'm going to maybe use a phrase because you, Dennis, because you're saying obviously being in aviation, right? So it's like a squadron of aviators, right? That we're putting in place. So rather than trying to go, okay, here's, should we say, one generative AI large language model to rule them all, right? Which seems to be the consumer space at the moment with ChatGPT-4 and Bard and Claude and what have you. We're kind of saying, okay, let's have that squadron, right? Let's have the specialists in the different areas, and then based on the products that you're using within OpenText, they'll then be trained and aligned with those things. So exactly as you say, from content management, right? Having Aviator pop up, you've got all your documents which are under control, under, whether they're in draft or review or different versionings and that kind of thing, and be able to do that. And we're also looking at how, within we can, should we say, more tightly integrate our products in a way that those level of controls are still there, but available in other tools, right? So as an example with our Smacks product, we've got an integration to the content products within an OpenText. So your data is available, for your contract data and that kind of thing. And then literally by having our ITOM Aviator sitting on top, you can then query that, subject to you having the appropriate controls to access that relevant data.
I'm going to bring Dewald's wingman, Chris, in here, sticking with the analogy. But Smacks, maybe you can just tell us what that means to the uninitiated, just very briefly. Dean, Smacks, it's a nice acronym.
Yeah, so Smacks, comes from Service Management Automation X. Okay, people always wonder why we got an X. Dependent on the timing of when you came across Smacks, the original meaning was X as in 10, because it was actually our 10th iteration, going back all through HP days of where our history comes from, of the products. But also when we kind of, not long after we just launched it, Apple brought out the iPhone X. So it was kind of like, obviously they're copying us, right? This is what happens with these big corporate companies, right? They see someone doing something good, so they've got to copy it and try and emulate. So yeah.
Seems Elon has done the same, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say a word on that one, right? That's another world entirely. But yeah, again, picking up on that X in that context. So it's a service management tool. What we did when we brought Smacks out originally in 2018 was it was kind of like a, what would we got a product service manager that had been around since the 90s, right? Or historically had come through from that point of view. We kind of went, what would happen if you built a tool with all our knowledge and all our experience and best practices and built it from the ground up today, right? And how could you do that? And we built Smacks to be this multi-tenanted solution, so it can kind of handle, for in a SaaS world, be a true SaaS product, but also the kind of thing that if a customer, an organization, maybe for regulatory reasons, or maybe just because they're nervous about moving everything to the cloud, which 5 years ago was definitely sort of kind of one of those weird things. Now, as today, I think a lot of people are more comfortable with having things in a SaaS type manner. But we have the same product irrespective of whether you take it as SaaS or you take it as hosted by our partners, or you take it and deploy it on premise yourself. You've got the same experience irrespective. So,
Chris, you want to add?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dennis. So, Dean, if we look at a sort of a common theme, and it happened by pure accident across our previous episodes, adoption came up quite often, where we spoke about adoption. We had Charles Hubert from the University of Pretoria on last week, where we spoke about adoption in a tertiary environment, and what the impact is on students. Now, and we have talked about this topic quite a bit, but I'd be interested in to see or to get your insight in potentially how can generative AI and AI drive or assist adoption inside organizations, specifically in the enterprise service management or ITSM space.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of different ways you think about that, right? So one aspect of I like to think of it is in terms of the service management solutions that you're doing, right? They all have specific processes and procedures, right? Whether you're doing request, incident, or change management. I mean, we all have in the ITSM world, we've all suffered, the heavy controls and procedures that have been put in place around change management, right? And going through cabs and all that kind of stuff. I think there's some easy wins around how generative AI can help with adoption and starting to use service management more, because if you take like change management as an example, those regimented controls that we have in place, right? Oh, I've got to fill out these forms, I've got to fill out these fields, I've got to fill out I've got to provide a build and test plan, I've got a validated certain criteria before we can push do that change. When ultimately that planned work, a lot of it is quite, I don't want to say it's reactionary, because you want to be doing proper plan maintenance, but a lot of people leave it almost to the last minute, right? Because they're kind of like, oh, we've got to get this done. We got and changes on the back end. Well, there's two aspects to this you can see. So generative AI could help speed up the creation of the appropriate change documentation, right? So, pulling in the relevant data. I mean, just as a capability that's not generative AI, but something that we have in SMAX today, right? I type in my description of what we're going to do, and I've got the name of my servers, right? Having it automatically link that to the records that I've got, right? So we call it CI detection, right? So within my CMDB, I've got automatically a full list of all the changes related to that CI. I've not had to spend 5-10 minutes linking all those servers to that change record, right? So you're instantly improving productivity, right, on that aspect from the person entering it. But then flip that to the other side, right, from a point of view of the service owner or the cab manager, right, or the change manager. I don't mean to be, maybe I'm going to be a bit provocative with saying this, right? Okay, the person who's the change manager, right, they don't know what all the products do that's within an organization and the tools, right? They're there to act as a gatekeeper, just to sort of say, are we okay? Are you all guys comfortable with this? Well, and ultimately their job is all about risk, right? Now you're in a world where if you're doing the right kind of summarization, and kind of to make Dennis's point earlier on, where it can simplify it and to explain it like a 5-year-old or what's being done, right? Those change managers are now starting to have a bit more understanding of what they're approving and what they're putting into the business. And then that also then ultimately helps on the flip side, because that means you're going to start to move away from having to approve potentially everything, and you can start to move towards, should we say, automating the processes about pushing out changes, right? We always talk about historically about the whole issue of Microsoft Patch Tuesday, right? Where it was like, I've got, X number of servers in the environment that I've got to update with all these patches, and you'd have to, one organization where I worked in, you had to have a separate change record for every single server that you had to update. The amount of time that was wasted, right? It's valid. It's important to have that tracking and that auditing, but generative AI can literally just streamline that, right? And I think that's, couple other examples I can think of from adoption. For the last, should we say, 15 years in the service management space, everything's about trying to drive people to a single portal, right? Have that single portal experience so people know where they can do. There are plenty of examples that we have, as well as probably our competitors, everyone else, where you see the benefits of that, right? One of our customers, when they first implemented SMAX, they turned around and said they did some testing, and their feedback on the first day of testing was thank you from one of their testers, and they said, okay, that's unusual just to say thank you, right? And they said, what do you mean? And they said, I've had this issue on my PC for the last 3 years that I've not been able to fix. I've gone to your portal. I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to ask the question, right? And they've found that knowledge article. They've solved their issue that they've had to deal with, which has probably been not a huge impact in terms of productivity, but it's probably been like a daily annoyance for them, right?
Yeah.
Now with generative AI, you're going from a portal and people who are designing catalogs and portals to a prompt. So you're changing the UX on people as well, right?
Yeah.
Now, some people are going to struggle with that. Absolutely, right? They're going to want, without being funny, everyone has their own preferred methods of the way they work. Some people like to search, some people like to browse, see what's available, that kind of thing. Some people are going to, embrace that, and they're just going to type into the prompt and get the answers to do that. And eventually you're going to see that. But that also ties into that we've seen a lot where we're moving, there's still a lot of email that I deal with, but as an organization, we're moving to tools like Teams, right, to Slack, right, where you're just having that conversation, and as long as you can refer back to that information, you're good. But you don't have to send the War and Peace. You can just do a quick thing and away you go. So
Dean, we're drawing to the close of our conversation, and I don't want to lose this nub of where you see things going. We're accustomed to asking CEOs, let us into your crystal ball, tell us where your company is in 5 years. I think in the world of generative AI, 5 years is a bridge too far.
That's true.
It's probably 5 weeks. But if you can let us into your crystal ball where you see things going without giving away too many state secrets within open text.
No, it's yeah. I'll do my best, and I'll try not to get into too much trouble with my bosses. So I think the first thing is there's a number of use cases that we've seen, right? So we've kind of talked about that, should we say, that summarization aspect and pulling back that information, right? No longer do I need to create specific knowledge articles that are short and sharp, that are quick for people to read. I can, in essence, have a 300-page knowledge document, and my job's done, and the customer can, the end users can utilize that. The other aspect of it as well is how AI works with automation. So I'm going to give you something that's maybe seen as a little bit scary. So people like Chris and myself, we've lived in a world where you build out service catalogs and you manually go and create your automation, right? You go and create workflows, and you make sure you've got all the variables and everything in. What if I told you will never need to do that ever again? Right? So take it to the level where generative AI, you ask the question, I'm on my corporate PC, I need Adobe Photoshop as an example, right? One of those kind of things that has a bit of a cost to it, cost associated with it. I type in, can I get Adobe Photoshop, right? The generative AI picks that up, right? And it goes, okay, you're asking for Adobe Photoshop. It then knows that it's got to look and find out whether Adobe Photoshop is available, right, for you within your corporate world. But then it will kick off, and if it is available, go and automate and get it delivered to the PC, right? Now, what if it's something where you ask for something that's not standard, right? The AI will build its own task plan to figure out and send off the approvals and get sign off, and then go and put the order in and get it delivered to you electronically or even physically. So you're going to get into a world where I think that whole AI plus automation is going to just instantly make a big difference.
Dean, beautiful way to close off. Because I think, if memory serves me well, Chris, in our next podcast, we're going to be bringing Sian in from ArcelorMittal, and automation is top of mind. What can we look forward to in our next one?
No, thanks, Dennis. Yes. On the next episode, as we spoke previously, we said the proof is in the pudding. So we're bringing in Sian Boshoff from ArcelorMittal to discuss, the impact enterprise service management has made in the environment. What are the steps, they took to implement and to get momentum, drive efficiencies. And Charles spoke previously about human resources. Today we spoke a bit of human resources quite a bit. I think what ArcelorMittal did with their HR processes is something special, where they automated it from an end-to-end point of view, which makes it quite interesting, especially if you look all the work that Dewald and I spent on HR. It could have been done with generative AI if we had it at the time. So yeah, Sian we'll have a nice discussion with Sian in that, taking that process apart and the lessons learned and some of the nice concepts we have seen as part of that process. Looking forward to that chat as well.
Chris, fantastic. Dean, product manager, OpenText, Smacks. What a smackdown session we've had. You've really entertained us with your insights, and we can only thank you for joining us in our chief sessions. Chris, Dewald, thank you very much. We look forward to the next one. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.